What's up, good Vipo? Let me know that you can hear me by typing in the chat either Happy Holidays, Justice for Dre, or Day 1C. Either Happy Holidays, Justice for Dre, or Day 1C, because we are on still day one of the trial, transcripts, but we are on part C. Also, it looks like YouTube is something going on with YouTube today. I feel like the chat is a little bit more delayed than normal. I noticed that from the video we just did. The numbers, the counts of the views is all wonky. So I don't know what's happening, but if there's any glitches on y'all's side, just know that I am aware of it and having some issues on my side as well. Thank you to everyone who's letting me know you can hear me. Oh, and welcome to our I'm trying to do it here. Welcome to our Instagram Vipo. I kind of got y'all chat here. I'm gonna try my best to be aware that chat is going on as well. But thank you to everyone who's on the YouTube side letting me know that you can hear me. Alice and his MJ, Nicole, Sugar, Reggie, Chanel, Nicole, that's Nicole in there twice. Shamika, Aaron, Tamika, Onisha, and Shanice, and Tamika, and everyone else who's letting me know you can hear me. I greatly appreciate that. So like I said, we are on day 1C of the trial. For those of you who are not aware of what's happening here and you're like, what the hell is going on? We are doing a reenactment of the U.S. versus James Timothy Norman trial that was held last year. I know some people are like, I thought the trial was over. Yes, it is over. However, our people wanted very much for us to do this, and they have waited a very long time patiently. So we are doing it. We are doing the reenactment, and the fact that I was actually there for the entire 2 weeks of the trial every day, all hours that we were there, means that I can add insight into what we're reading and reenacting in the transcripts. So today, what we expect on the agenda as far as the transcript is concerned, we will be wrapping up the jury selection. There will be some conversation between the attorneys, deciding on the last, on which jurors make the cut, basically. The past 2 days, basically, we were going through that. Y'all got to hear their stories. You got to see why or why not with some of these jurors. There were some very interesting stories. There was a lot of shenanigans. There was some people who looked like they was clout chasing, trying to get on the jury because it was their favorite show and they wanted the tea, but they had to instead watch me. But we have that. And then after that, today, we will be hearing opening statements as well from both sides, from Tim's attorney as well as the government, from attorney Angie Danis on the government side. Hers was epic, in my opinion. I'll let y'all see. It's been a long time since I heard it, but I remember when I was there, I was like, Lord, I wish I had took shorthand because it's so good. I want them to hear every part of this. So I now can't wait because I haven't read this at all. So I'm going to be hearing it for the first time verbatim since the day I heard it well over a year ago. So I'm excited for y'all to hear that. Then I think we may also make it to the first witness testifying, which was Michelle Griggs, who is Andre Montgomery's mother. So I think we should get to those. So that should be the agenda for today. Just know that after today's episode, for lack of a better word, we will see you back here on Tuesday of next week. We're taking a break for the Christmas holiday. We'll see you on Tuesday, December 26th at 7:15 Central, 8:15 Eastern, back here on the same back channel. And that video is already up. And so please run over there when you get off of here, hit that like button, hit that notify me button. It just helps YouTube spread this video to way more people. And if you're on Instagram, we're going to be on here more than the hour that Instagram limits us to. So if you want, you can check my bio. The link in the bio will bring you to my YouTube page. No, it's going to take you to my link tree, but you can find my YouTube page there. It is Vell B Reacts on YouTube. And then you can watch the second half because we're going to be on here for 2 hours. Let's see. Also, new news or update news out of the Sweetie Pie's camp. One of our people sent me a message. One of our people from our very important people, for those of you who don't know what VIP is, but our VIP people from our text community sent me a message regarding one of Tim's friends who is known as Big Ed. Big Ed is Tim's friend and the bodyguard for both Miss Robbie and Tim. And he has allegedly, unfortunately, been in a major car accident. And someone posted, I don't know, this is all alleged because someone shared this with me, but it's also being shared third party from someone who posted something on Facebook. So I don't have any direct, wasn't able to confirm this, but it's probably true. But anyway, Ed, the post here says, my brother Ed Lover was just in a bad car accident, 4 broken ribs, punctured, I don't know what a linger is, and liver bleeding internally. Please pray for my homeboy. So that is Big Ed. Again, Big Ed is Miss Robbie's bodyguard, as well as Tim's when Tim was out. When Tim was out, and Tim would be in St. Louis in town, but he's primarily Miss Robbie's bodyguard. And you'll actually, there's the only picture I really have of him is one where he's outside of the Upper Crust location, standing next to Miss Robbie during that week when she was closing the restaurant and there was a lot of press and stuff around. He's also the person who pulled me aside during the trial when I was coming live every evening, reporting in real time what was happening in during the trial. He pulled me aside to tell me that the man that I was saying was sitting next to Miss Robbie with his arm around her. And I was like, oh, Miss Robbie got her a young thing, blah, blah, blah. This man, you know, he come in, he looking, you know, dapper, this and da, da, da. Well, he was one that was like, excuse me. He was like, that's actually not Miss Robbie's her boyfriend. I don't know. I think he told me in that moment that that's her stepson. So that was actually Tim's brother from his father's side. So so I have had a little interaction with Big Ed. Also, Big Ed is going to be in these transcripts. Big Ed testified as a character witness for Tim Norman. So it's towards the end of the trial. We'll get to Big Ed's testimony, which will be interesting. It gets really interesting when we get to those parts. So we're praying for his full recovery and, you know, all that good stuff. Hope everything turns out okay. So getting to the what you came here for tonight, the actual transcripts. Tonight, our cast is Precious G. We have Robert. Well, Precious G is playing Angie Danis. Pretty much that's going to be the big part of her role tonight. Angie Danis, and then she'll fill in where needed. We got some worked out. Then we have Margin, who is going to be playing the role of Gwendolyn Carroll when needed, as well as Michelle Griggs when Michelle Griggs testifies. And then we have Robert, who is going to be playing the role of Tim's attorney, Michael Leonard, also known as Mr. Leonard. So I'm going to bring up our cast and hold on, let me make sure I didn't skip anything. I think I got everything. I think I got it. Yeah. Yep, we're good. All right, I'm bringing up Margin and Robert and Precious. Hello, cast. Hello. There we go. We got it. All right. Put up his picture. Okay, so we're gonna. Let me grab it. I'm producing and acting at the same time. Okay, so we left off the other day. We left off with them taking a break. Now we are returning from the break, and they may still be. Hold on, I think they're still in temporary recess. But let me just read. So we have Judge Ross here. My computer is timing out. Okay. So Judge Ross. Hold on. Let me enlarge this first. Let me not even try to do this while I'm reading, because then I'll have problems. And it jumped pages. Give me a second. All right, here we go. So narration is at 1:06 p.m. The proceedings stood in a temporary recess. At 1:30 p.m. the proceedings resumed in court. So now we have Judge Ross. He's saying we are here on record in the courtroom outside the hearing of the jury. So remember, I told you guys the last time that outside of the hearing of the jury means that the jury is the jurors are still not in the courtroom. They are housed somewhere else, and the counsel and the judge are talking. So Judge Ross goes on to say, before we broke and we went through our strikes for cause, the court had identified that our initial pool for the jury was panel members 1 through 32 that were left after the alternate strikes. And the alternate strikes would be from 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37. And there was an agreement of counsel with regards to that. Is that correct, Mr. Leonard?
Yes, sir, Your Honor, that is correct.
And the government's understanding as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
And so the government has submitted their strikes, and it is in their intent to only exercise 3 of their 6 strikes, and they are striking panel members 9, 16, 23. Is that correct, Ms. Danis?
That's correct, Your Honor.
And the government's alternate strike is panel number 35. Is that correct?
That's correct, Judge.
Any record that you want to make on behalf of the defendant with regards to the strikes exercised by the government?
No, Judge.
And it is with the court's understanding that the defendant is exercising their strikes as to panel members number 1, 3, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, 17, 19, and 20. And the defendant's alternate strike is panel number 33. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any record that you want to make on behalf of the government with regards to the strikes exercised by the defendant?
No, Your Honor.
Then with that, we will go through a number. I was trying to do this out of my glass. My eyes won't focus no more. We will go through the then with that, we will go through and number those who will sit and serve as jurors in the case. Juror number 1 is panel member number 2, Mr. Rose. Jury number 2 panel. Okay, I'll skip that because he's just going through each panel number and who's and their name, their legal name. And then he says the alternate jurors, the first alternate, and I'll let y'all know where I'm resuming. So I'll read this part. We are now on page 47, and I am jumping down to line 18.
Okay.
The alternate jurors are the first alternate is panel number 34, and the second alternate is panel number 36, and the third is 37. Is that the jury that you have selected to hear and decide the case, Ms. Danis, Ms. Carroll?
It is, Your Honor.
And that's the jury you have selected to hear and decide the case, Mr. Leonard, Ms. Rodriguez?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
Okay, if you will return your jury list to the clerk. What I'm going to do is take a break at 2:30. Mr. Burnson will go down and get those 15 members of the jury who will be seated and sworn in as jurors. I'll read the introductory instructions, and we will have the opening statements. And again, Mr. Leonard, you indicated during the final pretrial conference that you wanted to make your opening statement after the government's. Is that correct?
Yes, Judge, we will.
he like, I'm gonna go after y'all so I can use some of y'all points. The court, so Judge Ross says, okay, anything else that we need to take up on behalf of the government at this time, Ms. Danis, Ms. Carroll?
I don't believe so, Your Honor.
Anything else on behalf of the defendant?
No, Your Honor.
Did you work out the issue of the exhibits?
I believe we did. Is that correct?
Margin?
Sorry. We have one more review we are doing, but we are very close to anything. Very close to having worked it out, Your Honor.
All right. Again, it is my position, my view, that since exhibits haven't been admitted into evidence, if you are going to use them during your opening, then you need to consent the consent of the opposing counsel. So again, as to both sides, if you will make sure that you have that. With that, we're going to head to break until 2:30. Hopefully you can have some time to get a bite to eat. Then the court at 1:38 p.m., the proceedings stood in temporary recess. So keep in mind, all that time we had been on break. And then just for the cast, know that we're moving to our next document while I'm just talking.
Okay. Give me a minute to bring that up.
So yeah. So yeah, in that time, we, the public and the jurors, had been outside of the courtroom that entire time, just on break until we came back. Now, in our mind, as you know, the media, people who were outside, we were, you know, there was a lot of chatter about, well, because the jury pool was so large that was going to take up the entire day. And one of the marshals actually told me that they were pretty sure, they were thinking they weren't going to get to the opening statements on the first day because of how large the jury was, and that was outside the norm. And so my thing was, I'm still going to sit here and wait. And they said that earlier in the day. And as much as I was kind of like, this is a lot, and I had already drove down there and all kind of stuff, I was like, something told me to stay. And I'm so glad that I stayed, because when we came back from break, that's when we found out opening statements are happening today. Then on top of that, they had Miss Michelle Griggs testify. So that was, it really just, for me, I realized very early on the first day that Judge Ross wasn't playing. He wants to get that over with. He was serious about keeping on track with getting it done within 2 weeks, which for me was very encouraging, because I was like, okay, at least he's not trying to drag this out at all. He's just trying to go ahead and get the cuffs on Tim. So with that, we're going to take a commercial break, and then when we come back, we'll be coming back with the going into the opening statements and the opening statements and Miss Griggs' testimony. So I'm gonna drop everybody down, and then I'm gonna play this commercial for y'all, and we will be back.
Ray came back the last time from being in St. Louis. He wasn't living with Robbie at the time. He came back and he said, Mom, he said, if anything ever happened to me, just know that Tim did it. What are you talking about? He said, well, just know Tim don't never do his own dirty work. But I got that fatal call from her about Dre, and I didn't want to answer the phone. You know, I just didn't want to answer the phone. And then she hung up and she called right back. And then that's when she was like, well, you know, the detectives was here. And already my heart is already slowing down, you know, and to the point where they want her to go down to the morgue to identify that was him. That was it. You know, it was like, it was so surreal. Everything just rolling around. I'm just like, not my son. You know, not my son. Not my son.
All right, we are back. I'm going to bring our cast back up, and we are going to move into the opening statements and testimony. And we are starting on page 1. We're now in. So the way these transcripts are set up, for those of you who are just kind of viewing and not aware, what we're reading is the transcripts, and I forgot how many parts, y'all. It's looks like it's about I think it was 11, 13 different PDFs, and each one is a section. Some of them are just a particular day, but some of them have multiple parts to that day. So we are still on day 6, but the document we're looking at is volume 1B. The one we were just looking at, the PDF, was 1A. So we are on document 1B, page 1, and I'm starting at line 1. That's for my cast to know where I'm at. And let's see, we'll put that back up on the screen. So at 2:50 p.m., the proceedings resumed in open court. So Judge Ross says, counsel, anything we need to take up before we bring the jury in on behalf of the government? Ms. Danis, Ms. Carroll?
No, Your Honor.
Anything on behalf of the defendant?
No, Judge.
The jurors are in the jury room, so we will bring them in. John, if you will identify them by juror numbers and bring them in, okay? And so then what happens is John was basically court assistant. I don't know what, I think he was the clerk or something.
Bailiff?
But he wasn't a bailiff though.
Oh.
But he would come and just go through the side door. The jurors were pretty much right outside. Like, it wouldn't take them long. He would grab them. They would come through the door, and they would come through next week I'll have the actual drawing. I forgot to pull my drawing I have for y'all of the courtroom. But basically, they would come through the door, and they would just sit, like, make an immediate right, and they came in on the side of the jury box. And then they would just single file line, very orderly. It almost reminds you of elementary school or something. And then they would sit down quietly, no talking, no making eye contact with people, none of that. Just come sit down. And they would have their notebooks and, pen, but that would be it. So the jury was seated. Judge Ross goes on to say, ladies and gentlemen, those of you in the jury box, you have now been selected as jurors to hear and decide this case. Before we go further, I just want to confirm with counsel, Ms. Danis and Ms. Carroll, this is, in fact, the jury you have selected to hear and decide the case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Leonard, Ms. Rodriguez, is this the jury you have selected to hear and decide the case?
Yes, yes, it is, Your Honor.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, you have now been selected as jurors in this case. You have a notebook with a pen there on the chair. I'm going to give you instructions here in just a moment regarding that. I'm going to give you some other instructions with regards to your service here as jurors. But at this time, if you would please rise now and be sworn to serve as jurors. And then the jurors were sworn, duly sworn. Then Judge Ross goes on to say, ladies and gentlemen, I have some instructions to read to you at this time. We'll see how much I read. I might jump around, skip through some of this. I didn't read it verbatim yet. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will take some time now to give you instructions about the case and about your duties as jurors. At the end of the trial, I will give you further instructions. I may also give you instructions during the trial. Unless I specifically tell you otherwise, all such instructions, both those I give now and those I give later, are equally binding on you and must be followed. You must leave your cell phone, smartphone, iPhones, and any other wireless communication in the jury box during the trial, and may only use them during breaks. However, you are not allowed to have cell phones in the jury room during your deliberations. You may give the cell phone to the court security or the clerk for safekeeping before you start to deliberate. It will be returned to you when deliberations are complete. This is a criminal case brought against defendant James Timothy Norman by the United States. The defendant is charged with conspiracy to commit murder for hire, and conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud. Those charges are set forth in what is called a superseding indictment, which I will summarize as follows. Count 1 of the superseding indictment alleges that beginning at a time unknown to the grand jury, but up to and including March 14th of 2016, and through the date of the superseding indictment with the Eastern District of Missouri and elsewhere, the defendant Tim Norman and co-conspirators Terica Ellis, Vell Anthony Hill, together with other persons known and unknown to the grand jury, did knowingly conspire to commit murder for hire and using and causing others to use cell phones with the intent that the murder of Andre Montgomery be committed as consideration for receipt of money. Said conspiracy resulted in the death of Andre Montgomery on March 14th of 2016. Count 2 of the superseding indictment charges that on or about March 14th of 2016 in the city of St. Louis within the Eastern District of Missouri, that the defendant James Timothy Norman, as well as Terica Tanisha Ellis and Vell Anthony Hill, aided and abetted one another and or others actually committed the murder for hire of Andre Montgomery. Count 3 of the superseding indictment charges that beginning on or about October 14th and continuing until at least late September of 2019 in the Eastern District of Missouri and elsewhere, the defendant James Timothy Norman and Wael Rabib Yagnam did voluntarily and intentionally co-conspire to commit wire fraud and mail fraud. Count 3 further alleges that the primary purpose of the conspiracy was for the defendant James Timothy Norman, aided and abetted by Wael Rabib Yagnam, to obtain and to be able to collect on life insurance policy on his nephew Andre Montgomery in the event of Andre's death by means of false and fraudulent representation regarding Montgomery's income, employment, net worth, medical history, family history, and the existence of other pending issues or denied life insurance applications. You should understand that an indictment is simply an accusation. It is not evidence of anything. The defendant has pled not guilty and is presumed to be innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It will be your duty to decide from the evidence whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty of the crimes charged. For the evidence, you will decide what the facts are. You are entitled to consider that evidence in light of your own observations and experiences in the affairs of life. You may use reason and common sense to draw deductions and conclusions from the facts which have been established by the evidence. You will then apply those facts to the law, which will give you in these and in my other instructions, and in that way reach your verdict. You are the sole judges of the fact, but you must also follow my instructions whether you agree with them or not. You have taken an oath to do so. Do not allow sympathy or prejudice to influence you. The law demands of you just verdict affecting by anything else except for evidence. Your common sense and the law as I give it to you. You should not take anything I may say or do during the trial as indicating what I think of the evidence or what I think your verdict should be. Finally, please remember that only this defendant, not anyone else, is on trial here. And that is the defendant is on trial only for the crimes charged and not for anything else. In order to help you follow the evidence, I will now give you a brief summary of the elements of the crime charge, which the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt to make its case. As of to count one, which charges conspiracy to commit murder for hire, the elements are 1, 2, or more persons reached an agreement or came to the understanding to use interstate commerce facilities, to wit, cellular telephones, with the intent that a murder for hire be committed and death resulting. And 2, the defendant voluntarily and intentionally joined in agreement or understanding either at the time it was first reached or at some later time while it was still in effect. And 3, at the time of the defendant joined in the agreement or understanding, he knew the purpose of that agreement or understanding. And fourth, while the agreement or understanding was in effect, the defendant or one or more of the persons who had joined in the agreement knowingly used or caused another to use a facility of interstate commerce, to wit, a cellular telephone, for the purpose of carrying out or carrying forward the agreement or understanding. As to count 2, which charges murder for hire, the elements are the following. 1, that a person at or about the time charged in the indictment used or caused another to use any facilities of interstate commerce. And 2, that the use of any interstate facility was done with the intent that a murder be committed in violation of the laws of the state of Missouri. And 3, that anything of any pecuniary value was received or promised or agreed to be paid as consideration for the murder. And 4, the death of Andre Montgomery resulted. As to count 3, which charges conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud, the elements are the following. 1, beginning in or about October of 2014, for y'all, that's 2 years before Andre's life was actually taken, and continuing until at least as late as September of 2019, 2 or more people reached an agreement to commit the crimes of wire fraud or mail fraud. Secondly, that the defendant voluntarily and intentionally joined in the agreement or understanding either at time it was first reached or at some later time while it was still in effect. And third, that at the time the defendant joined in the agreement or understanding, the defendant knew the purpose of the agreement. You should understand, however, that what I have just given to you is only a preliminary outline. At the end of the trial, I will give you final instructions on these matters. If there's any difference between what I just told you and what I tell you in the instructions I give you at the end of the trial, the instructions given at the end of the trial must govern you. I have mentioned the word evidence. Evidence includes the testimony of witnesses, documents, and other things received as exhibits. Any facts that have been stipulated, that is formally agreed to by the parties, and any facts that have been judicially noticed, that is facts which I say you may, but are not required to accept as true with even without evidence. Certain things are not evidence, and I will list the things for you now. Statements, arguments, questions, and comments by lawyers representing the parties in the case are not evidence. Objections are not evidence. Lawyers have a right to object when they believe something is improper. You should not be influenced by the objection. If I sustain an objection to a question, you must ignore the question and must not try to guess what the answer might have been. Testimony that I strike from the record or tell you to disregard is not evidence and must not be considered. Anything you see or hear about this case outside the courtroom is not evidence, unless I specifically tell you otherwise during the trial. Furthermore, a particular item of evidence is something received for a limited purpose only. That is, it can only be used by you for one particular purpose and not for any other purpose. I will tell you when that occurs, the instructions instructs you on the purposes for which the item can or cannot be used. Finally, some of you may have heard the terms direct evidence or circumstantial evidence. You are instructed that you should not be concerned with those terms. The law makes no distinction between direct and circumstantial evidence. You should give all evidence weight and value you believe it is entitled to receive. In deciding what the factors are, you may have to decide what testimony you believe and what testimony you do not believe. You may believe all of what a witness said, or part of it, or none of it. In deciding what testimony of any witness to believe, consider the witness's intelligence, the opportunity the witness had to have seen or heard things to testify about, the witness's memory, any motives the witness may have for testifying in a certain way, the manner of the witness while testifying, whether that witness said something different at an earlier time, the general reasonableness of the testimony, and the extent to which the testimony is considered with other evidence that you believe. At the end of the trial, you must make your decision based on what you recall of the evidence. You will not have the written transcripts to consult, and it may not be practical for the court reporter to read back lengthy testimony. You must pay close attention to the testimony as it is given. If you wish, however, you may take notes to help you remember what a witness said. If you do take notes, please keep them to yourself until you and your fellow jurors go to the jury room to decide the case. And do not let note-taking distract you so that you don't hear other answers by the witness. When you leave at night and at each recess or adjournment of the court, your notes will be secured and not read by anyone. During the trial, it may be necessary for me to talk with the lawyers out of the hearing of the jury, either by having a bench conference here while the jury is present in the courtroom, or by calling a recess. Please understand that while you are waiting, we are working. The purpose of these conferences is to decide how certain evidence is to be treated under the rules of the evidence to avoid confusion and error. We will, of course, do what we can to keep the number of those and the length of those conferences to a minimum. To ensure fairness, you as a jury must obey the following rules. First, do not talk or communicate amongst yourselves about this case or about any involvement with it until the end of the case when you go to the jury room to decide your verdict. Second, do not talk with anyone else about the case or about any involvement with it until the trial has ended and you have been discharged of your jury as a juror. Third, when you are outside the courtroom, do not let anyone tell you anything about the case or anyone involved with it until the trial is ended and your verdict has been accepted. If someone should try to talk to you about the case during the trial, please report it to the deputy clerk. Fourth, during the trial, if you should talk with or speak with any parties, lawyers, or witnesses involved in the case, you should not even pass the time of day with any of them. Basically, don't get involved with nobody. And we respected that as the public and media. Even when they would get on elevators and stuff, we would be like, oh, they're getting on that elevator, let's wait. But they were kind of amongst us. They were mingling, and not mingling, but they, like, if we wanted to violate any of this, it was easy to do because they was there. We would be around them, even though they would let them go before us and all of that stuff. But looked like everybody respected it. I think it's just a little bit more. It is important not only that you do justice in this case, but that you also give the appearance of doing justice. If a person from one side of the lawsuit sees you talking to a person from the other side, even if it is simply to pass the time of day, an unwarranted and unnecessary suspicion about your fairness might be aroused. If any lawyer, party, or witness does not speak to you when you pass in the hall, ride the elevator, or the like, it is because they are not supposed to talk to you or visit with you. So don't feel disrespected. Y'all shouldn't be talking. We shouldn't be talking to each other. Fifth, it may be necessary for you to tell your family, close friends, teachers, coworkers, or employers about your participation in this trial. You can explain when you are required to be in court and can warn them not to ask about the case or discuss the case in your presence. You must not communicate with anyone or post information about the parties, witnesses, participants, charges, evidence, or anything else related to the case. You must not tell anyone anything about the jury deliberations in the case until after I accept your verdict or until I give you specific permission to do so. If you discuss the case with anyone other than the other juries during deliberations, it could create the perception that you have clearly decided the case or that you may be influenced in your verdict by their opinions. That would not be fair to the parties, and it may result in the verdict being thrown out and the case having to be retired. Okay, let me just check on the rest. So basically, he's repeating, about the cell phone use. He is repeating about not researching anything online. Don't read anything. Stay away from the media, basically. Until the trial is over, he's suggesting that you ignore all of that. For my cast, I am scrolling down. I'm down to page 14, but I'm still scanning. Okay, we'll skip that. Ninth, faith performance. Okay, we're skipping. A lot easier. The instructions were long and forever. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to wrap it up with, I'm on page 15, line 7 for my cast. Page 15, line 7. So he's closing out and he says, Judge Ross says, following the prosecution's case, the defendant may, but does not have to present evidence, testify, or call other witness. If defendant calls witnesses, the prosecution may cross-examine them. After the presentation of the evidence is complete, the attorneys will make their closing arguments to summarize the interpretation of the evidence. As with opening statements, closing arguments are not evidence. The court will then instruct you further on the law. I guess it's the stenographer does have some typos in here. I noticed here or there. So I think this was one, but the court will then instruct you further on the law. After that, you will retire to deliberate your verdict. And with that, when we will have opening statements on behalf of the government. So Miss Danis, Miss Carroll, you may proceed.
May it please the court. In the 18 months before Andre Montgomery was murdered, Andre's uncle, the defendant, Tim Norman, applied for five different life insurance policies on his 20-year-old nephew, Andre. In the days following Andre's murder, the defendant didn't call Andre a grieving mother to express his condolences. He didn't text. He didn't email. In fact, the defendant didn't speak to Andre's mother until the day of Andre's funeral.
Hold on, I'm going to do a little commentary, only because this will be long and I want people to understand the points. So what they're saying here is when Andre passed away, Tim actually never. So she hears Michelle Griggs gets the call from Miss Robbie saying that, the detectives are there. They're saying Andre has passed away, has been killed or whatever. Then she goes to identify the body. In fact, it is Andre. You know, now everything has to be together. They got to put a service together and all of that. All this stuff happens. I don't know how long the service was after that, how many days or weeks or whatever. Tim never once reaches out to Miss Michelle Griggs in all that time. She doesn't hear from him or even see him until the day of the funeral. Not a call, not a text, not a, oh my God, what happened to Dre? Or, oh, I'm so sorry, y'all need anything. None of it. Silence from Tim until he showed up at the funeral. Go ahead, Marjorie.
Sorry. Andre's mother until the day of Andre's funeral, when he said sorry for your loss and walked away. Now, although the defendant didn't call Andre's mother in the days following Andre's murder, he did make several calls. 2 days after Andre's murder, the defendant called a man named Daryl Howard and instructed Daryl Howard to make a $5,000 cash payment to Tervell Hill. Tervell Hill will testify in court that he murdered Andre Montgomery and the defendant paid him to do it. 5 days after the defendant ordered the payoff of the man who murdered his nephew, the defendant called the Forster's life insurance company to collect on the $450,000 life insurance policy he had taken out on his nephew 18 months earlier. You will see a lot of evidence in this case: financial records, travel records, phone records, location records, text messages, photographs, and it may seem like a lot, like it is complicated, but that evidence will prove that what is actually very simple plan. The defendant planned to have his nephew murdered for the life insurance payout. You will see that the defendant plan had 5 steps. Step 1, get life insurance policy on Andre. Step 2, find Andre's location. Step 3, send the shooter to murder Andre. Step 4, pay off the people who helped the defendant find and murder Andre. And step 5, collect the life insurance money. The defendant enlisted the help of a number of different people in this plan. But as you will hear, the defendant didn't tell any of these people his whole plan. He only gave each person the information they needed to do their part of his plan to have Andre murdered for the life insurance money. Step 1, get a life insurance policy. Andre, the defendant, used a life insurance agent named Vell B.
YL. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. Step 2, find Andre's location. The defendant used 3 people: Big Ed, Chandler, who worked security for the Sweetie Pie restaurant, who were run by the defendant's family; Chris Carroll, the defendant's friend, who also worked for these restaurants; and Tarcy Ellis. Tarcy Ellis is an exotic dancer and a prostitute the defendant has known for years. For step 3, send the shooter to murder Andre. The defendant also used Chris Carroll and Terrence Ellis.
Terica.
Oh, sorry, Terica.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Travel Hill, the shooter who murdered Andre. And step 4, pay off the people who helped the defendant find and murder Andre. The defendant got his friends, Daryl Howard, to make that cash payment. The Tervell Hill, the defendant himself paid Terica Ellis. Step 5, collect on a life insurance money. The defendant used the same life insurance agent
YL.
Vell, to try to collect on the policy after his nephew murder. As you will see, the only one, was involved in all 5 steps of the defendant's plan to have his nephew murdered for his life insurance money was the defendant himself. Let's go through the evidence of the defendant plan step by step. Step 1, get a life insurance policy on Andre. The first person the defendant enlisted to help with his plan was
YL.
Vell,
Mhm.
a life insurance agent. You will see these 5 different life insurance applications the defendant submitted on the life of Andre. And you will see that every one of those 5 applicants contains false statements as to almost every aspect of Andre's life. Andre's height, Andre's weight, his phone number, his address, his income, his net worth, his medical records. You will see the defendant text message with Mr. Yagnam.
Yagnam.
The defendant texted Mr. Yagnam and says he needs life insurance policy on his 20-year-old nephew who just came to town as soon as Mr. Yagnam can get the paperwork done. The defendant asked Mr. Yagnam if Andre's mother has to sign. Mr. Yagnam assures the defendant she does not. The defendant says he doesn't want to talk about it in front of Andre, and that later Mr. Yagnam texted the defendant saying that the life insurance company is going to be calling, and the defendant should act like he is Andre. And when the Forrester's life insurance company approves the defendant's application for $450,000 policy in his 20-year-old nephew, step 1, the defendant's plan was complete. Which brings us to step 2, find Andre's location. Several people helped the defendant with this part of his plan. The first was Mr. Big Ed Chandler. Big Ed Chandler worked security for the Sweetie Pie restaurant. And 8 days before Andre's murder, Big Ed texted the defendant's photo of Andrew showing the defendant, who was living in Los Angeles, that Andre was in St. Louis at the same time. Chris Carroll, the defendant's friend, also called and texted the defendant, letting him know that Andre was in St. Louis. And the defendant booked a flight from Los Angeles to St. Louis. Chris Carroll picked up the defendant up at the airport in St. Louis morning. Andrew Montgomery was murdered. From the airport that morning, the defendant went to the Chase Park Plaza Hotel where he had reserved a room the day before Andre was murdered. About an hour after the defendant got to the Chase Park Plaza Hotel here in St. Louis, he sent a message to a woman named Terica Ellis asking her to meet him in his hotel room. Terica Ellis is an exotic dancer, a stripper, and a prostitute the defendant has known for years. He met her when she was dancing at a club in East St. Louis. Terica Ellis was in town that weekend with Andre for murder from Memphis. She was dancing at a club in East St. Louis. And when the defendant sent her a message that morning of Andre's murder, telling her to come meet her at the Chase, she did. Terica Ellis would play a key step in part 2 of the defendant's plan. Find Andrew's location. Terica Ellis went to the Chase, had sex with the defendant, and then afterward He offered her $10,000 to find and send him Andre's location. Terica Ellis knew Andre as a client of hers at the strip club, and $10,000 was a lot of money. So Terica Ellis agreed to help the defendant find Andre. And then the defendant stood over her, telling her what to say. Terica Ellis began to text Andre, trying to find out where he was. And when Andre texted Terica Ellis back, telling her that was the La Quinta Inn on Taylor Road, 1 minute later, the defendant called Travel Hill. And then he gave Terica Ellis $10,000 in cash right there in the hotel room at Chase. The defendant also instructed Terica Ellis to buy a prepaid phone, just like the one he had. He told her to only use the prepaid phone to call him and to call Andre, and told her to get rid of her other phone. Terica Ellis did what she was told, and she went and bought a prepaid phone and then went to go find Andre at La Quinta Inn. She got to La Quinta, confirmed that Andrea was there, and called the defendant to let him know she had found Andre. The defendant told her that he wasn't ready and to keep tracking Andre and to keep updating the defendant on where Andre was. Terica Ellis spent the day calling and texting with Andre, keeping track of where he was and updating the defendant. Eventually, Andre texted Terica Ellis what would be his final address here in St. Louis, 3964 Natural Bridge. 30 seconds later, Terica Ellis called the defendant, and the defendant told her to call his homeboy and give his homeboy Andre's location. Terica Ellis next called to Vell Hill, and with that, step 2, the defendant plan was complete. The defendant had a life insurance policy on Andre, and Terica Hill gave the defendant Andre exact location, which brings us to step 3. Send the shooter to the murder Andre. The defendant involved 3 people in this step of his plan: Chris Carroll, his friend, Terica Ellis, and the stripper, and Travel Hill, the shooter. He will remember, you will remember Chris Carroll, the defendant's friend, who let the defendant know that Andre was in St. Louis and picked up the defendant up from the airport the morning that Andre was murdered. That's not all Chris Carroll did for the defendant in his plan. In the days leading up to Andre's murder, Chris Carroll contacted Travel Hill. Travel Hill was a drug user and a drug dealer the defendant had known for years. And the days before Andre was murdered, Chris Carroll negotiated the price of Andre's murder on behalf of the defendant with Travel Hill. Travel Hill ultimately agreed to take whatever the defendant would pay him. On the day of the murder, Andre's murder, the defendant himself met with Travel Hill and told him that a female would be calling him with Andre's location. Sure enough, Terica Ellis called Travel Hill on the day of the murder and gave Travel Hill Andre's location on Natural Bridge. In response, Travel Hill asked Terica Ellis to get Andre to come outside the house. So Terica Ellis drove to the house on Natural Bridge Road and called Andre when she got there. Andre came outside the house, met Terica Ellis in her car for a few moments, and then got out of the car and started to walk toward the house. As Andre was exiting Terica Ellis's car, Trevell texted Terica Ellis telling her to move, and as Terica Ellis pulled away from the house, she heard the gunshot. That was the moment that Trevor Hill shot Andre to death right there in front of the yard of the house. Immediately afterward, Terica Ellis called the defendant. The defendant told her to get rid of her phone, go home, and never come back to St. Louis. Step 3 of the defendant's plan, sends a shooter to murder Andre, was done. Step 4, pay off the people who helped the defendant find and murder Andre. Now, at this point, the defendant has actually taken care of part of the steps himself. He already given Terica Ellis $10,000 in the cash the afternoon of Andre's murder in the at the chase. And shortly after 9 a.m., the morning after Andre's murder, Terica Ellis deposited $7,360 in cash at First Horizon Bank in Memphis. She spent some of the money the defendant gave her on household expenses and paying her family, who had watched her children while she was dancing in St. Louis. And then 2 days later, she deposited another $1,900 in cash at the First Horizon Bank. Within 3 days of Andre's murder, Terica Ellis deposited $9,260 in cash from the $10,000 in cash the defendant paid her to get him Andre's location. What about Travel Hill? Remember the phone call that the defendant made Daryl Howard 2 days after Andre murder, telling Daryl Howard to deliver $5,000 in cash to Travel Hill? The day Daryl Howard made the cash delivery in to Travel Hill, he took a photograph of the money before he gave it to Travel Hill.
Trevell.
Trevell.
Like
sorry.
Me.
I'll just start saying the last names. And you will see that photograph, $20 bills banded with red and blue rubber bands. And that you will see the photograph that Mr. Hill's girlfriend took of the money delivered by Daryl Howard. It is a stack of $20 bills unbanded, and you will see those in red and blue rubber bands in the background. Within 2 days of his nephew Andrew's murder, the defendant has taken care of step 4, pay off the people who will help him find and murder Andre. Before we get to the last step of the defendant's plan, collect the life insurance payout, I want to talk about something else you will hear during this trial. The defendant's 20-year-old nephew, Andre, was not a perfect person. He smoked marijuana. He posted flashy pictures of on Instagram of guns and drugs and money. And you will hear that the defendant told people that the reason he was looking for Andre was that he believed Andre was burglarizing his grandma's home. And the defendant wanted to confront him about that. But what the defendant didn't tell any of these people, what he didn't tell Terica Ellis, Mr. Hill, and Daryl Howard, was that 18 months before Andre's murder, the defendant had started applying for life insurance policies on Andre. The defendant paid Terica Ellis $10,000 for finding Andre's location. paid Mr. Hill $5,000 for killing Andre, but put the defendant. But what the defendant neither told neither of them was that he stood to make $450,000 off Andre's death, which brings us to the fifth step of the defendant's plan: collect the life insurance payout. 4 days after Andre was murdered. Can you say the name? Well,
YL
yeah.
Yakima.
The insurance agent, back from step one, Vell, called the Forest Life Insurance Company to confirm the defendant's policy was in place. It was. I mentioned earlier that you will see the defendant's text messages with Mr. Yagna. Thank you. You will, well, one of the messages you're going to see was sent by the defendant 5 months and 21 days before Andre's murder. The defendant texted Mr. Yagnam saying, Andre might not make it 6 months. Bro, not kidding. And that's just 9 days shy of 6 months later. Andre had been murdered by the man paid off by the defendant. 1 week after the murder was, 1 week after Andre was murdered, the defendant himself called the Forest Life Insurance Company to put a claim on the $450,000 policy. You will hear a recording of the call. You will see the record showing the defendant called Forrester several more times after that. And when the insurance company wouldn't pay out the policy because the defendant had been cleared as a person of interest in Andre's murder, the defendant hired a lawyer to help him collect. You will see the defendant's text messages to that attorney telling her that he was not in St. Louis on the date of Andre was murdered. He was in California, but you will have her Daryl Howard, Travell Hill, and Terrence Ellis all testify that they met with the defendant in person in St. Louis on the day that Andre was murdered. You will see the defendant travel records, his bank records, his phone location data. You will see he made cash deposits at the bank in St. Louis on the day Andre was murdered. The defendant was in St. Louis, given instructions, making cash payment, checking off each step of his plan to have Andre Montgomery murdered for the life insurance money. And at the close of this case, my counsel is going to stand up here and take you through. My
co-counsel
is going to stand up here and take you through that evidence step by step. Then she's going to ask that you find the only verdict consistent with that evidence. We will ask that you find the defendant guilty of life insurance fraud and the conspiracy to commit murder for hire and murder for hire.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Leonard, Ms. Rodriguez, do you wish to make an opening statement at this time? You may proceed.
As I was listening to that, I wish you all had the benefit of sort of a pop-up of what the witnesses are really going to say. What they are actually going to tell you, contrary to what counsel just represented to you. What she told you was a story of the facts as they believe them to be true. It was a story of limited facts, the ones that she thinks are good for her case. What she didn't tell you about is the context of those facts. What she didn't tell you about is a whole bunch of facts that say essentially just the opposite of what she said, and provide context to the facts and evidence that you're going to hear. Now, a complete context to all the facts is necessary for you to decide if the government has met their burden of proving Mr. Norman guilty or anything beyond a reasonable doubt. What they didn't tell you just now is that several of their crucial witnesses have credibility problems, serious credibility problems. And what does that mean? They're not truthful. What does that mean? They're going to lie to you. What does that mean?
Counsel, it is an opening statement. It is your opportunity to tell the jury what you anticipate the evidence will be, not argument.
Sure. What you'll hear is that these witnesses who are crucial to their case have substantial motives to testify falsely. And to understand this case, you really have to understand what you hear during this trial is the relationship between Tim's family, and the dissident, Andre Montgomery. Because what this really is, it is a story about a complex, rich, unique family here in St. Louis. You have to understand those family dynamics, which you will hear about during the course of the trial. Now let's start with Tim Norman. As the judge said, his name is James Timothy Norman. He has always been Tim. He is 43 years old, and he sits here before you. He was born into tragedy in this town a long time ago. His father was gunned down while he was still in the womb of his mother. His mother is known as Miss Robbie Montgomery. You will hear that she is somewhat of a local legend here in town. When she was younger, she was part of the Ike and Tina Turner band. She raised Tim. She's a strong woman. I think you will probably hear from her. She raised Tim with values. And one of the things that she did as Tim was growing up is she gathered this talent for being a cook. And she opened this, we have all heard about, we've even talked about Sweetie Pie's restaurant. And it started small. Just a ma and pa type of restaurant here in St. Louis, while Tim was going to Hazelwood Central High School here in the area. And while Tim was growing up, he had a half brother. He considered him a brother, like you would in a family. And his name was Andre Montgomery Sr., the father of Andre Montgomery that gets killed in this case for which we are here for. And after the death of Andre Montgomery Sr., you'll hear that Andre Montgomery, the dissident, he ends up growing up in Texas. So he is with his mom, Miss Greggs, in Texas growing up, going to high school out in Texas in the Lubbock area. Things aren't going so well. So they make a decision as a family. Hey, We will have you come up to St. Louis and finish up high school and live with Robbie Montgomery, Tim, and the family and get you on a better pathway. Of course, Andre's mom is on board with that. You will hear. Andre wanted to do that. Andre wanted to do this. So he comes here to St. Louis to finish up his high school. And, of course, Tim, being his uncles, always felt, number one, a special bond for Andre, but secondly, a special responsibility because, after all, this is his brother's child. Tim feels like he has responsibilities as if he were Andre Sr.'s father. And so Andre Montgomery comes here to finish high school in St. Louis. He comes in an incredible time for the family. You heard all about this TV show. What happened in a quick nutshell is Tim, you will hear, who had a talent for the arts and writing, has one in a million things happen. He writes a script for a reality TV show called Welcome to Sweetie Pies. You would think it would be thrown away in the garbage like other scripts. But lo and behold, Oprah Winfrey gets a hold of it and says, I want to do this reality TV show. Miss Robbie, Tim, and the family go from being unknowns, running a small restaurant here in town, to celebrities across this country. And comes with that unbelievable financial success. And you will hear the proliferation of Sweetie Pie restaurants, not just here in St. Louis, but across the country, in California, in Texas, and in Mississippi. So Andre steps into all of this. Because remember, Andre is going from Texas to finish high school here in St. Louis. And he becomes a member of the show. Not only is he a member of the family, but he is a member of the TV show. And you know, you create a TV show. You want a show that is a wholesome family show. You want to show all the good things. But behind the scenes, things were not so good. And Andre, like a lot of young men in St. Louis at that time, gravitated to the game, to the street, to the drug life. And you're going to hear about that. And what's happened is a decision is made to remove him from the TV show because of his lifestyle. You're going to hear about that as well. Now, Andre does finish high school here. He lives during that period of time. He lives during that period of time with the woman I mentioned before, Robbie Montgomery. Remember, that's Tim's mom, and that's Andre's grandmother. But by the time high school is finished, because of Andre's lifestyle and Ms. Robbie's legitimate concerns that he may be killed out there in the streets of St. Louis, she calls up Miss Griggs in Texas, Andre's mother, and says he needs to come back to Texas. So Andre goes back to Texas to live with his mother after high school. But when he gets to Texas, there are problems. He is sort of treading water. He really doesn't have a job. He has a part-time job, however, at a tobacco shop. He is really not even living with his mom. He's sort of couch surfing, living with a friend for a couple of weeks at a time, and then living with somebody else and getting into trouble all at the same time. So his uncle, this conspiring murderer that they say he is, what does he do when he hears about his nephew is struggling, not going anywhere with his life? What you hear is he decides, in connection with Ms. Robbie, let's bring Andre back here. Let's get him on a path where he can succeed. Let me be his mentor. This guy, they say, is this mastermind, conspiracist, murderer. So Tim calls up Andre's mom in Texas, explains, hey, I'll be Andre's mentor. He can come back here. I'm not going to treat him like his grandmother did now. I'm not going to give him 100% luxury life now, but I'll give him all important an opportunity. That's exactly what Tim sets out to do. He takes specific concrete steps to try to get Andre on a good path. First of all, he pulls all the strings imaginable and gets him in the top rap music school in the country, Nelly's Music School here in St. Louis. The Extreme Institute, it was called. A perfect fit for Andre. Andre wants to be a music producer, wants to produce songs. Tim is a singer, needs someone to produce songs. Instead of Tim paying thousands of dollars to producers, Andre is going to go to this top school and become a music producer himself. Well, Tim gets him in. And Andre gets a job at Sweetie Pie's here, a part-time job, however. Tim, evil mastermind, gets him an apartment right down from the hall from him in a beautiful part of St. Louis by the Central West End. Tim gives him spending money. Tim gives him cars, use of cars, everything you could do to put a young man in position to succeed. That's what you hear that he did. But it doesn't really work because Andre goes to music school. But then he doesn't. Andre works at Sweetie Pie's. But then he doesn't. Now, Andre, through all this, gravitates slowly back to the street life. Andre gets kicked out of the apartment that Tim gave him because he is getting in trouble there, and his friends are breaking into cars. They break into the ATM. Weed is coming from the apartment building.
Sorry.
Your Honor, objection. Objection is sustained.
So what happens is around the same time as Andre is back living the street life. Now, there is this whole idea that counsel has just said to you about evidence you're going to hear about insurance. Well, now let's talk about that, okay? Because this whole thing of insurance you will hear occurs at the same time Andre comes back from Texas when he is moved back here to St. Louis for Tim to be the mentor. How does that come about? You will hear from one of the allegedly star witnesses from the government, Mr. Yagnam. You're probably going to think of him as Wally, because we all call him Wally, because his name is hard to pronounce. And on the street, His name is Wally because they just can't pronounce his regular name. You will hear that Wally was, and Wally is going to testify. He is going to say that he was a music producer.
Objection, Your
Objection,
Honor.
Your Honor.
Use ready that time.
Approach the sidebar. This foolishness. So as y'all can see, Tim's attorney is very much so like, I'm about to discredit who Andre was. I'm about to make y'all feel like he deserved this in a way, and this had nothing to do with Tim because he was so perfect. He was a loving, caring uncle who just wanted the best for his nephew, and the nephew threw it all away for the streets and telling lies about Tim giving him his cars for his use. I mean, just lies on top of lies. So what happened was with the sidebar is, and I didn't pull it in, but that's where they play the white noise, the static sound. The attorneys and the judge, well, the judge is sitting at his bench, but they step to the side of his bench and then they confer, but we can't hear what they're saying. I don't know. Maybe this part, maybe it's here in the transcripts, but we couldn't hear any of that. So, okay, the sidebar proceedings, and then Judge Ross says, "What's the objection, counsel?"
Your Honor, first of all, it is argumentative. Second, the government has made no representations beyond the travel. Vell Hill will testify, and the defense counsel seems to be promising the jury that they will hear from Mr.
Yagnam.
The government has not testified. The defendant
Has not notified.
Has not notified the defense of which witnesses they will and will not be calling. It is improper.
There is nothing that would actually prevent the defense from calling Mr. Yagnam. I think it is permissible for him to say what Mr. Yagnam would say. I mean, but much of what you have argued, well, it is totally irrelevant to this case. So he's talking to Tim's attorney.
I'm getting there, Judge. It is a conspiracy. It is a conspiracy about an insurance policy.
You have to get to what you think the evidence will be that relates to this case.
Well, I'm there. I'm talking about the insurance agent.
The objection is overruled at this point. If you want to renew the objection, you can. Then the proceedings resume in open court. Counsel, you may proceed.
And what I expect Wally to tell you is the following. That in conjunction with Andre's return from Texas to St. Louis, Wally, who is himself a music producer, understands that the type of music Andre is into, which is called drill, a reality rap, which focuses on reality of the street, guns, drugs, threats, things of that nature, could make him a target. Wally, the insurance broker, will say that he thought it was a legitimate, a good idea to get an insurance policy on Andre. That's what Wally actually said. And what you will hear is that Wally has a meeting. What do you think is there? You will hear that at the meeting, Andre Montgomery is there sitting at a table with Wally so that Wally can take down all of the information about Andre so he can put it in the insurance application and then submit that insurance application for an insurance policy. That's not him. That's Wally. That's what Wally does. To have a meeting, he asks Andre all of the questions: health, education, fitness, height, wait. And what does Wally do? He brings with him 3 applications. He only fills out one, but he doesn't tell these guys that. But he has Andre sign them all. Fills out one, has Andre sign them all, and it is not Tim Norman that's submitting applications for insurance. So insurance companies, to these insurance companies, it's not Tim Norman. It is Wally, the insurance agent, like everyone else does in America. Now, what you will hear is that Wally cuts a few corners. So Wally takes the one step where he really filled it out. One app that he really fills out. He takes the other app where he has the signature. And he does things such as trace over signatures of Andre and Tim Norman. Wally, he does things like get an electronic e-file application and pretend it is Andre and Tim clicking a checkbox to sign for the application. That's what the insurance agent does. That now is the insurance fraud. It is hard to defraud somebody, meaning Andre, and plot against him when he is the only guy who knows that a policy is being taken out on him, that he knows his uncle is paying the premiums. And he knows that his uncle will get the death benefit if he dies. Kind of hard to defraud Andre Montgomery when he knows all these things, and yet he agrees with them. Now you will hear in the testimony and evidence that it wasn't just Tim Norman that took a life insurance policy. So did Andre's grandmother, Robbie Montgomery, because she too saw the dangers associated with Andre's life. She too took out a policy of insurance. So did Andre's mother. She took a policy of insurance out on Andre. Now, are they all criminal masterminds that are out to kill Andre? The evidence won't support that. So as things are kind of falling apart here in St. Louis for Andre, after he moved back while Tim was trying to mentor him, a significant event occurs, which you will hear a lot about during this trial. Andre's mother's house, where he lived, the house he lived at during high school, Robbie Montgomery's house, Robbie Montgomery, the one who started Sweetie Pie's restaurants, it gets robbed. Someone comes in who happens to know the code, happens to know the house, happen to know the hiding places. And lo and behold, they get away with hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. They get away with valuable property. They get away with irreplaceable items from Robbie's career as a member of the Ike and Tina Turner Band. They get away with a tower where you store data that has Tim's scripts and Tim's music. What you will hear is right after the place gets robbed and everything is taken, Andre Montgomery is gone. He is gone for about 7 months. Robbie Montgomery, his own grandmother, believed that he had taken the loot from her house. She believed that her grandson had robbed her of all those things. What you will hear during this trial is 2 things. Robbie Montgomery makes no secret to the entire world that she is looking for Andre Montgomery. Why? Well, not to kill him, not to harm him, but simply to get him to fess up to return the property and return to the family after he does that, like a grandmother would. You will hear there is no secret with that Tim Norman, my client, he is making it known to the whole world that he is too looking for Andre on behalf of his mother. Why? To kill him? No. To get back the loot that Andre stole from his mother. To have Andre fess up. And to have Andre return to the family. Because despite his actions, kind of like the prodigal son, the prodigal son, the hearts were still there if Andre would do those things. The heart was still there for him to come back to their lives. So they did things like they hired a private detective. They looked at pawn shops. They talked to people in other cities to figure out where he was, what he was doing. But what you will hear is they obviously believed that he couldn't be traveling the country with all this loot, with all of this property, that it had to be stashed here in St. Louis. That makes sense, right? And so it takes us to March 2016, when Andre Montgomery is killed. Before we get there, you just heard from the government that this mastermind over here is so desperate for money in March 16th that he wants his nephew killed so he can collect an insurance policy because he needs that money. Here's what the evidence will show during this trial. That just simply isn't true. That Tim at that time was living in Los Angeles. Why? Because the Sweetie Pie show and the restaurants had gotten so big, they were starting to open up in LA. So they took a whole bunch of the cast out to LA. They were shooting the show out there. Tim is living in LA. Now, he ain't living like a pauper. He's living in a luxury accommodation. He has got probably as many cars as I have fingers and thumbs. And he has got, from everybody's account, tons of money all the time. Why? Because you have Sweetie Pie stores here. Multiple locations. You have Sweetie Pie stores in LA. And eventually they're going to open them in Texas and other states. He ain't hurting for money. It doesn't make any sense when you hear the evidence. There is no money for Tim. No, there's no need for Tim to get money. Let's talk about the fateful day where sadly Andre is killed. They just talked about these key witnesses, right? Well, let's talk about what really happened. Not their versions of what happened. What the facts will show during the trial.
Counsel, is this an argument just?
Well, sorry, Judge. What you hear, let's start with Ms. Ellis, Ms. Tarika Ellis. She's an exotic dancer. She is a stripper. She does basically prostitute herself out. There's no question about that. She's already here in St. Louis working. So she gets in town, say the late Thursday or Friday, several days before Andre is killed. She is not here as part of any kind of conspiracy. You will hear she is here to dance. She's here to simply make money. She's not here because Tim Norman said, hey, come into town. and do a murder for hire. She is working. You will next hear that the way they meet up, Tim and Ms. Ellis, is that Tim comes to St. Louis. Why? You will hear it is not because of some murder conspiracy. Why does Tim come to St. Louis that weekend from LA? He does that consistently since he moved. Why? Because he comes here and he goes to the sweetie pie stores and he takes the money out of the safes. That's what he does when he comes to St. Louis. And that's why he was here that day. And what the testimony will actually show is that, like so many other times when Tim gets into town, well, you might not like his lifestyle, but he contacts women that has had prior sexual relationships with him, and he reaches out to Ms. Ellis. Excuse me. He doesn't know if she's working or not, and she responds. And like so many other times, she comes to his hotel room and she has sex with him. Whether or not that's good or not is not the question here. But that's what happened. Neither of them were here for any criminal mastermind of a murder for hire. That's what the evidence will show. And happens is you will hear that Ms. Ellis, in the past, she likes to ask Tim for money. Can I have this money? Can I have that money? Can I have this money? And he gives it to her. But one thing is also clear. Every time they have sex, he gives her money. And this is no exception. It is exactly what happens like so many other times. And what you hear is kind of bizarre coincidence. They have sex. They are talking. They shower. They're talking about their lives. She is saying, hey, I'm going to open this boutique store down in Memphis, where she really lives. And Tim is talking to her about what is going on in his life. He's living out in LA, all that kind of stuff. And he tells her, as a matter of fact, you know, there is this thing with my nephew. He robbed Ms. Robbie's house. We have been looking for him. He has no idea that Ms. Ellis actually knows him, that those two had been communicating unbeknownst to Tim Norman. How? Because Andre Montgomery had gone to a strip club. He met Tarika Ellis and told him he was a rapper from New York, told her. So in a bizarre coincidence, Tim learns from Tarika that Tarika knows Andre. It doesn't sound like a sophisticated, planned out murder plot, because it is not. That's how it comes about that Tim learns for the first time that Tarika even knows Andre. And as the government said, you're going to hear from Tarika. What is she going to tell you? She's going to say that Tim never mentioned any idea or plan or to harm Andre or to kill Andre. It just didn't happen. Just like Tim had told her, we're looking for Andre to get our stuff back. Now that's what he told her. Just like him and Ms. Robbie had been telling everybody for 7 or 8 months. So they agree, since she knows him, she can put Tim in a location where they can find Andre and they can get their stuff back. Pretty simple. Not nefarious, not a murder plot. And Ms. Ellis is going to tell you But she thought for a second that Tim, who is now known for years, found him to be a gentleman. If she thought that he had any intent to harm or kill Andre, she would have no part of it. But she knew that's what Tim's intent was. She
did
knew
not.
Tim.
She did not.
Oh, she did not.
Mm-hmm.
She would have no part of it. She knew Tim and Ms. Robbie were looking for him. Now let's go to Vell Hill, the other witness the government relies upon. Just to remind you, Vell Hill is the guy that shoots Andre Montgomery dead. Who made that decision? Vell Hill? Vell Hill and Vell Hill alone? Vell Hill had no agreement with anybody to harm Andre Montgomery. Vell Hill had no agreement with anybody to kill Andre Montgomery. What you will hear is this story. Vell Hill is going to get up there and say, well, I met with a guy named White Chris. Who is White Chris? White Chris is a guy who sold drugs with. He sold drugs with. That's who White Chris is. He's not some mystery man. Here's a guy who he sold drugs with, and he's going to tell you, it wasn't Tim Norman that told me to harm or kill Andre Montgomery. It was this guy, White Chris. But White Chris didn't even say that. He just said something that led me to believe that maybe he wanted him killed. That's what he's going to tell you. That's not an agreement with Tim Norman. That's not an agreement with anybody to do anything.
Counsel, is this an argument? Again, opening statements is your opportunity to tell them what you anticipate the evidence. It's improper to have told you, and I have told you a couple times, make an opening statement only.
Well, thanks, Judge. Sure, that's what you will hear from Vell Hill. They also mentioned a couple of other people. They said that Big Ed, is key to this somewhat. What you will hear is that Ed is an ordinary guy. He's a guy that works at Sweetie Pie's. He is a guy that did security. He might work in one store or another, making sure that the lines are good. People weren't causing any trouble. And Ed will tell you that, yeah, he saw Andre at Sweetie Pie's location a week or 10 days or 2 weeks before Tim Norman came to town. And the evidence will show that when Tim Norman gets a text picture of Andre being here in St. Louis, Tim Norman doesn't rush back here to try to harm or kill Andre Montgomery. Tim Norman doesn't reach out to anybody and say, hey, grab him, hold on to him, don't let him go. You won't hear anything like that. It is a simple text by a simple guy named Ed to Tim and various other people. It is like, hey, look, Andre is back. He's been gone for several months. Everyone thought he stole. He's back here in town. That's what the evidence is. The last person the government emphasized was a guy named Daryl Howard. Again, what you hear him testify to is not what you are saying. Daryl Howard won't tell you that. Hey, I knew there was any sort of plot, by Tim or anyone else to harm Andre Montgomery. That never happened. And the great thing about this is that you don't need to take my word for any of this. You will get to these people to testify in this courtroom on that witness stand. And then you can evaluate whether the government has met its burden of proving Tim guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of anything. And whether what I'm telling you they're going to say is what they say. Because when you hear what they are going to say during this trial over the next week or two, we think you're going to conclude that the government has failed to prove Tim Norman guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of anything that he is charged with. I appreciate your patience.
All right, commentary time. Mr. Leonard, I appreciate your crackpot opening statement. So the tone of that, I decided I didn't want to keep interrupting them because it's a lot. So I held a commentary for the end. But we have reached our 2 hour, where we're right at the end of our 2 hour limit. And we have a cast who are working for free. So I'm not going to take up any more of their time. So we will not get to Michelle Griggs tonight. However, the next thing is actually her being called to the witness stand. So when we resume right after Christmas, I need to confirm that with my cast because I wasn't able to. Is everyone available on
Yes.
the day after Christmas? Okay, good. Well, the cast has confirmed. But yeah, so the tone of that was with Tim's attorney was, you could tell he wasn't really fully connected to the case. And he's, as you're seeing, you'll see a lot of things he was saying that weren't going to be proven were absolutely proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The things he was saying that people would say that would vindicate Tim didn't happen. This was just like him rambling. But Judge Ross was like interrupting him and like, hey, this is not argument. This is an opening statement. What are you doing? And he did that. He gets reprimanded a lot, especially during the beginning, pretty much the whole trial, but especially in the beginning, because he was trying a lot of tricks and stunts. And Judge Ross was like, stop it. We're not doing that here. All these theatrics you're doing, trying to confuse the jury because they don't really know what's happening. You're not going to do all that here. So, but I'm going to do a couple of the starred comments that we had throughout the evening. It says, Vell, I hope we will one day know that he stole the money from his own mother. That will be the end for the family. Stay tuned for the Griggs siblings video. Stay tuned. But I can't say nothing else. Old Soul is saying Tim plotted and planned for those 18 whole months. Not one time did he not grow a conscience and stop this. Yeah, I mean, that's to me huge. When I realized through the trial that he had been planning this and plotting on Andre the entire time, that was like it was beyond like, how could you plot on your nephew? And even setting it up like asking for him to come back to St. Louis after they had sent him back to Texas after he graduated high school. He had him come back to St. Louis under the guise of he's gonna teach him how to be a man and, you know, help him get in school and all these other things. When he did all that, only to plot on him to get him to sign the life insurance policy. And when Miss Michelle testifies, you're going to hear the details of how that went down, and you're going to hear just how trifling that was and maniacal. Marnie is saying Tim is and was not a singer. One of his problems was he was trying to do too much. He was a restaurant owner trying to be a rapper. Rap career never made sense to me. Yeah, Tim was actually another person. Tim actually, his real aspirations were never the restaurant, ever. His real aspirations was actor, rapper, singer, whatever. He had a music group at a time with JR, and then all of them had talent and he didn't. So they all would like kind of start doing their own thing. And he got mad at them because of that. So Tim never wanted the restaurant business. The restaurant business became a means for him because of the fact that he was writing stories. He was writing plays and TV, TV shows and stuff, trying to get something picked up. One of his friends, and I have the interviews somewhere recently, I just ran into it, but I'll play it for you guys eventually. He had an interview where he talked about how one of his friends is the one who encouraged him to try to create a show about the restaurant. That's why he became so engaged in the restaurant, because of the show, because of the Hollywood piece of it. Not because he loved the restaurant or wanted to really, it was a means to get him to his end goal of being an actor, singer, whatever, celebrity. We were just fooled, by him being in the restaurant all them years. Was Dre's mother in the courtroom during this? I can't imagine having to sit there and hear these lies. No. So I want you guys to keep in mind as we go through this, the people who have not testified yet are not in the courtroom. They can't come into the courtroom until after they testify. So because she hasn't testified as of yet, nobody is there. No witnesses are able to be in the courtroom until after they testify, because they don't want them in there beforehand, because they don't want them hearing testimony from other people or these opening statements, etc., which could then lead their testimony if they feel a certain way about anything. So no, she was not in there for this, but as soon as he finished, literally right at the end of this, then they call her into the courtroom. But after they called her into the courtroom, she was there the rest of the whole trial. So she only missed these opening statements and all the jury selection, all that stuff. She didn't get to see any of that. But after she testified, she was there every day from beginning to end. She was clocking in like work. Judge Ross wasn't playing with Michael Leonard. Right. He was not. The entire time he wasn't. Like, he barely ever reprimanded the government side, but it was a lot for Tim's attorney. But Tim's attorney was on some shenanigans because he was trying to get Tim off by any means necessary. Michael Leonard will do anything to try to win a case. This includes assassination of the victim's character. Absolutely. We just watched that. We literally just watched him assassinate or attempt to assassinate the character of Andre. So with that, we're going to say goodbye. I'm going to let our cast, if they have anything to say. Thank you all. Oh, put in the chat your clapping hand emojis for our great cast this evening. They had some long parts today. Woo! It was long. So definitely give them the hand clap emojis. And this last poll question I had, do you think Tim set up Miss Robbie's house to be burglarized? 97% of you say yes. The 3% of you, I am very curious if you could comment either in the chat or below this video. For those of you who might watch it later, comment below the video and let me know if you don't think he burglarized the house, just kind of your reasoning for thinking that. I'm always curious of the outliers. So with that, Precious, any parting words for the audience before I drop you down?
Happy holidays, everybody, and just get ready to hear us on the 26th.
All right. Thank you. All right, and Robert, Mr. Robert, any closing words for our audience?
I think the attorney should be on trial himself.
He's just getting started too. Oh, it's so much more to come. He's just getting started. He's just getting warmed up. All right, so I'll see you later. I'm gonna drop you down. Oh, I'm on the wrong area. And Margin, any closing words for our audience?
Well, happy holidays. Sorry for the mispronunciations. I don't read as good as Robert does.
Oh, no problem.
I think Miss Rob, I feel so bad. I think Miss Robbie, I understand she's a mother and she has to back up her son, but Robert has grandkids too. And as much as you love your son, you should also love your grandchild as much, if not more. And so the fact that she is clearly supporting Tim during this whole trial is just kind of heartbreaking. That, I mean, I understand, but he's already a felon, and he's doing all this also.
Yeah.
So that's a shame. But happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah. It's called Stockholm syndrome. Sometimes people fall in love with their abusers and can't see them for who they really are. That's There's a little bit of that. All right. Well, thank you so much. Happy holidays. And I will see you on the 26th.
Okay.
All right. Take care. All right. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for being here with us. And we will see you on the day after Christmas at, what is it, 7:15 Central, 8:15 Eastern. And thank you to all my Instagram viewers. I've been having the chat here. It's just harder to interact with the chat. But I'm noticing Instagram kept us on for more than an hour. So that's beautiful. But with that, until next time, happy holidays, everyone. Please be safe out there. I want all of you back here whole with every limb that you have right at this moment, every bit of your sense. Remain, keep it in the name of Jesus. Keep it. Plead the blood over y'all for y'all safety out in these old crazy streets. We're going to be talking about some of them stories coming up in the next few weeks as well. I'm going to get back to some of the true crime stuff. It is so much happening out there. So y'all be safe. Be aware of your environments. Stay in the house if you can, but you got to live your life. Live your life, but be safe out there, y'all. All right. With that, until next time, until I upload the next video, make sure to take care and be blessed. And I'm gonna play y'all out with what I'm gonna play y'all out with. I'm gonna play y'all out with the trailer from the interview with Miss Michelle Griggs and hashtag justice for Dre.
Dre came back the last time from being in St. Louis. He wasn't living with Robbie at the time. He came back and he said, Mom, he said, if anything ever happened to me, just know that Tim did it. What are you talking about? He said, well, just know Tim don't never do his own dirty work. But I got that fatal call from her about Dre. And I didn't want to answer the phone. You know, I just didn't want to answer the phone. And then she hung up and she called right back. And then that's when she was like, well, you know, the detectives was here. And already my heart is already slowing down, you know, and to the point where they want her to go down to the morgue to identify that was him. That was it. You know, it was like, it was so surreal. Everything was just rolling around. I'm just like, not my son. You know, not my son. Not my son.